In this video, we're going to be comparing the Sony A7 IV against the Sony A7R V. We're going to be talking about the key differences between these cameras, and with the Sony A7 IV being the hybrid of the Sony world at this moment in time, is it really that much better for the hybrid shooters out there than the A7R V when it comes to the rolling shutter? And after using both of these cameras over the last year, which one would I actually recommend? These cameras were released around about a year apart from each other, so you wouldn't actually expect that much to be different between the two. But if you've been following Sony in any way, shape or form, you'll know that they like to bring out cameras and new specs like they're going out of fashion. And more annoyingly, they don't seem to like updating their older cameras' firmware. However, don't worry, the A7S III update is coming at some point, so we've been told. Between these two cameras, there are a whole lot of differences. Physically, you will see that the LCD screen on the back is completely different. On the A7 IV, you'll see the flip out screen, which we've seen on the A7S III. However, on the A7R V, you've got the new 4D screen, so it doesn't just flip out like the normal A7S III screen, you also get the fold out screen like on the original A7. And we can't deny the flexibility that this thing gives you is just incredible. However, the image that you get from both of these LCD screens is entirely different, but we'll get to that later. Both of these cameras have two SD card slots. However, on the A7R V, both of these slots can also take CF Express Type A cards, whereas on the A7 IV, only one of them can. However, apart from that and a few very minor things between these two cameras, they look almost identical. Now, inside the cameras, looking at the features that each one gives you, these cameras are entirely different. We'll take off the basics to begin with. The Sony A7 IV comes with a 33 megapixel sensor. Personally, I'm very comfortable shooting on a camera with only 33 megapixels. It's perfectly acceptable for printing, and it's very rare that a client is going to turn around to you and ask you to deliver something of a higher quality. Whereas the A7R V has 61 megapixels, which is more than enough for any situation you'll ever find yourself in. But the larger pixel count also comes with a larger file size. You can, however, bring that file size down if you wish by shooting in a compressed RAW format or even the lossless large, medium or small, and all of these options are available on both of the cameras. You can also bring that pixel size down as well by using the lossless small and medium modes and still use the full width of the sensor. For me personally, I've always used the uncompressed RAW, the highest quality you can get from the A7 IV. However, when it comes to the A7R V, I'm gonna confess, I do use compressed RAW rather than uncompressed RAW. For me, I've never encountered any quality issues when it comes to editing, and I get to decrease the file size by 50%. But by all means, you don't have to follow what I do. Having them extra pixels is really beneficial when you have to crop more than you usually would. The type of photography I really find it useful for is for wildlife photography. On the R5, you can even go into APS-C mode, which gives you a 1.5 times crop, and it still gives you around about a 28 megapixel image. There has been times where I've gone out and only had the one lens with me, and it hasn't had enough reach. Instead of just missing the photo, I've taken the photo and cropped in post, and it's still giving me a good enough image quality. Now, one of the biggest differences between these two cameras is the autofocus. Having a reliable autofocus system in your camera is critical, and it can mean the difference between getting the shot and not getting the shot. On the A7 IV, we have subject recognition for human, animal, and bird. However, on the A7R V, you've got them three alongside the plane, bird, no, plane, fucking, I can never remember these. Plane, train, car, and insect. I got it right. So at first glance, the A7R V has a more inclusive autofocus system over the A7 IV, but let's not stop there. The A7R V also has the new AI autofocusing system, so it'll focus on the eye and the face like the A7 IV. However, if it can't see the face, it'll attempt to look for the head, and then it'll attempt to look for the body. Regardless of the features that both of these cameras have, if it isn't giving you a great image, then what's the point in having it? Straight out to camera, the image for photography for both of these cameras are pretty much indistinguishable. However, one thing I will say is on the back of the screen, the image is slightly different between these two cameras. The Sony A7R V has a much more of a cooler blue tint to it, whereas the A7 IV looks a little bit more warmer and a fraction of magenta thrown in. I'll be honest, it's something I have never really paid attention to until making this video and doing the tests. The A7R V also has extra photography features that have been built in, but the ones that stand out to me is the pixel shift, which allows you to take a photo at at 240 megapixels, and also the focus stacking feature, which I'm going to be doing a video about in the coming weeks. So if you want to check that out, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Now, when it comes to the video features, strangely, the A7RV, which is mainly a photography camera, still seems to do really well when it comes to video. Both of these cameras come with lens breathing compensation, however, you will lose 10% of your image when it crops in. Both of them will also shoot 4K up to 50 or 60 frames per second, and the R5 will even do 8K. And you may be sat there thinking, holy shit, that's incredible. Well, it's nothing to shout about. As much as it may be useful for certain shots, I would never ever use the 8K from this camera for anything other than a static tripod shot. The rolling shutter of this camera is pretty dreadful. And if you're going to be doing any kind of panning shots or moving shots, then just don't film in 8K, please. But whilst we're talking about rolling shutter, here's something which has completely surprised me. For a long time, I've been led to believe that the R5 will have a worse rolling shutter than what the A7 IV will. Bigger sensor, bigger rolling shutter, that's what I've always been led to believe. But look at this. This is a test between both of these cameras side by side, and look at it. It's only slight, but I do feel like the R5 looks marginally better than what the 4 does. What do you think? Now, with both of these cameras giving you 4K in S&Q mode for up to 50 and 60 frames per second, what's the catch? Well, on the R5, you get a crop of around about 20%. However, on the A7 IV, it goes into APS-C mode, which is a 1.5 times crop, or 50%. Even if you come out of S&Q mode to go into movie mode to film in 50 or 60 frames per second, to hopefully interpret it later on down the line, it will still crop into APS-C mode. There's no way around it in camera, unfortunately. Both of these cameras also come with the steady shot stabilization and active stabilization. However, remember, active stabilization will still give you a 10% crop on top of whatever you've got at the moment. And how I mentioned that the image on the back of the screen looks slightly different when it comes to photos, it does in video as well. However, it actually does affect the video files. And let me just make this clear, all of the control footage that I've shot has been shot with identical settings. The same white balance, the same pitch profile, the same ND filter. I've tried to keep it as consistent as possible. And whichever one of them you prefer comes down to personal taste. Now, after using both these cameras together for the last 6 months and knowing everything that I know about them, which one do I prefer? Did I make a mistake in buying a particular one, and which one would I recommend? Now, this is a bit of a two-edged sword. It depends what type of creator you are. I actually love the A7 IV when it comes to making content on social media. It's an affordable camera and it comes with the features which benefit me when it comes to making these videos. And for the photography part of it, I love it for that as well, and I would happily use it for pretty much everything that I do in my job. But there's the pretty much, which is a problem. If you're a serious photographer and you're wanting to do anything like sport, motorsport, wildlife, or fine art, then the A7R5 is a much better suited camera than the A7 IV. As a B camera, it's perfectly fine, but I wouldn't use it as my main camera. That's where I'd go for this. The A7R5 is expensive. It's almost double the price of the A7 IV. However, if you're at the stage where you're needing an A7R5, then these actually just become tools of the trade. And if you're wanting to get the A7R5 but still do a little bit of filming, this is perfectly acceptable. And this is exactly why I describe this camera as an A7 IV but on steroids. Now, if you're wanting to buy a camera which has a lot of the features that the A7R5 has, however, the A7R5 is a little bit out of budget, maybe Sony isn't for you. Watch this video if you want to know more about it. However, if you want to stick around and watch more Sony content, watch this right here. I'll see you real soon. Take care.